Beep, beep. What is up, guys? My name is Sam World, and as music producers, I think we can all get the sense of feeling when we've kind of stagnated. We keep making music, but we don't see improvement, and we always wonder, what is it? Why aren't my tracks sounding great and all that? Now, over the past decade, I've been watching a lot of YouTube tutorials in order to teach myself how to make music inside of Ableton. Maybe watching State Awake Production to back in the day, Lucky Date, or even Boy in a Band. However, there's been tips that really have helped a ton whenever I felt that I was stagnated, and today I'm going to be showing you guys some of these that I've learned recently, as well as back in the day where I felt like, what else can I do to the music to make it better? As always, if you want to support the channel, make sure to head over to evilsounds.com, and let's get started with a couple of these. When working on music, we're going to run into the problem all the time of our tracks kind of sounding rather dull and boring, or very robotic and lifeless. It might be either one, but there's one tip that got told to me that just really helped, and that is, if you want to bring your song to life, if you want to make it feel like it's alive, you need to execute automations and always be looking for opportunities to do it. So an automation obviously is going to occur when you'd say you have something and then you're pretty much telling Ableton like, hey, I want this knob to turn and I want it to turn like this. So then you set up the thing. The key thing with automations is that it can make your mixes just sound more exciting and your transitions sound even better. And today I'm going to show you guys a couple of examples of that. So here we have a track where I have this pad that I'm using sort of as a transitional cue, just to kind of set up, you know, the drop of the track. So I'm going to play it first without any of the automations that we've applied, just so that you can see how it sounds like versus when the automations occur. So the sound fits the purpose of helping us transition without using like too much white noise or an annoying uplifter. But the problem with it is, as you can see, it sounds rather dull and boring just staying in the center, and it doesn't sound alive. It's just literally just laying there going beep. So how can we fix that? Automation. So one of the things that I decided to do is use a utility, and I thought, you know what, it'd be so cool if the pad opened up. As we go into the drop, it just kind of opens up and allows us to walk in, like sort of opening the doors for someone. From there, that's going to help. We have Crystallizer, which is a really cool delay, granulizer delay from Sound Toys, and of course just a very standard automation of EQ. So from there, once we apply these, you're going to see how much more exciting it sounds like, because the sound changes and it sounds alive rather than just like boop. You're going to see how it just evolves as we approach that drop. The last example I'll give of automation is, again, making drum fills, anything really sound exciting. That's the purpose of it. So for instance, here we have this tom sort of thing that occurs, which is a pre-drop fill for the track. Okay, now with the automations of an auto pan, I find that that sounds more exciting when you actually put in a little bit of effort. When working on a song, you're usually going to run into the issue of like, cool, I have the track, but it's lacking a bit of ear candy. And then from there, you start looking for sounds that just don't seem to fit the track. Well, this is where resampling comes into play. And this technique I actually learned from a student of mine called PLSNT, which he has a release over on Nora and Pierce label, if you guys want to check it out. And I think he learned this from Enamore himself, as well as he does learn from him. Now, the idea is, let's assume here we have this section of the song where it's a little bit sort of, again, kind of empty, and you want to add something in a specific spot. Now, obviously that spot's going to be around this section here, so I might decide to look for a sound, or better yet, resample. So the way resampling works is going to be, find something like a cool plugin that you can put on the piano and then see what you can produce with it. So one of these for me is called Portal from Output. And a lot of people, when they first saw this plugin, they probably asked themselves like, what would I use this for? Is it worth the $100? And my thing with these kind of plugins, which do very crazy things, is, you know, you might be talking about modulation, delay with like frequency shifts and grain and all this cool stuff, granulation. What the hell am I going to use it for? Well, one of the things is just, again, creating new things, new ear candy, new source, new material out of your existing sounds. And the cool thing about this is that it's always going to fit the track for some weird reason, right? So for instance here, let's just kind of go, maybe I'll do a rhythmic one, or yeah, let's try maybe this, right? So I'm going to put it on the piano at 100%. That's the idea of this. And I'm just going to play it out looking for maybe things to sample out of it. For instance, let's assume that I like this one. So what I can do from there is play around with it more if wanted, or, you know, resample it. So the way I would do this is in Ableton, I would go click here. I would click resampling. I would record. Now, what Ableton's going to do is anything it's playing, you're going to be able to record it. So from there, we're just going to hit play. And we're just going to record this. Again, just going with it. Okay, and once we have it, again, we're just going to take the effect off from our piano by deleting it. And now we're going to have this material here. So from there, I might decide, okay, cool, I like it, but it's obviously a little too busy for it. So let's use it for the spots that I feel we need ear candy. So I might decide to just do something like this, where we apply a little bit of a fade to allow this part to breathe, and then we come in with the effect. And let's make it maybe a tad bit louder just to see. I'm going to add a bit of reverb and delay, like super like overdone, just to see how that sounds like. And that's really cool because now from there, I can start grabbing it and putting it throughout the song. And the cool thing about it is, since the sound is, again, coming from a sound you already have, it's going to fit the track most of the time, unless you're doing weird stuff and distorting it and creating like wubs or something. But it's a cool technique, resampling stuff and using it for ear candy. Now, if your track is sounding rather dull and boring, another question you got to ask yourself is if you have the right amount of tension and release. And what I mean by this is the fact that if your track always feels like released and there's no tension being created, then it's not an exciting track. Now, the best way to explain tension is there's two forms, micro level and macro level. So the micro level will be as simple as your simple fills here, where you essentially have your track doing this. So this would be considered a micro, where the transition occurs from first part of the drop to the second. And the thing I hate the most is when people make a micro transition, micro tension, and then release it. And all they do is get rid of the kick drum and don't put effort into it by adding effects and automating stuff, which is the first tip in this video. Okay, the other thing too is now at a macro level, one of the things I see a lot of people do is that right from the drop or bridge, they'll go straight into the break and give it all away. They'll just do, here's the progression, here's all that, without creating any sort of tension. So one of the easiest things to do is just kind of kill the harmony and have something happening where people feel like, okay, I know something's going to happen, and they're just anticipating it. So one of the cool ways to do this is obviously to have a break where very scoped back, you're kind of waiting for something to happen. So of course there the tension is very scoped back, and then you release it with this big climax in the song. And that's sort of a macro level sort of tension and release where you create that. So if you hear a lot of tracks, you can see them, Anjuna Deep South tracks, even some big room tracks, where there'll be a split second where, you know, there's no harmony. Maybe there's a melody playing and then the melody keeps playing, but then the release of the tension is when you finally harmonize the melody, which is what the listeners sort of want. These are cool little things to kind of execute in your tracks. And again, there's multiple ways of doing this, and I recommend that you hear music to get inspired on how they're doing it. But again, a track without tension, and it's really going to be a track where it's boring because you're not making me want it. You got to play, I guess, a little bit hard to get. Now, when it comes to dance music, it's very easy to get into this loop mentality. And while most music is going to be based on loops, one of the biggest mistakes I see is that when people come back into a loop or come back into a certain section of the song that they've done before, is they don't make it sound any different. And this is probably one of the best tips I have for people that just feel their music doesn't go anywhere. So for instance, here in this track, which we've been hearing, we have our first drop, which is going to occur. So a lot of tracks like in EDM are going to have this formula: break, build up, drop, second part of the drop, back to a bridge or a breakdown, and then again back to the drop with the same idea. The problem is when they go back into the drop again, which for me is at the 69 mark, and that's done on purpose there, they don't come in with added elements. So, or they'll like make their first drop super big and give it all away. And then the second drop is just pretty much the same. So one of the things that you can do is obviously make your first drop sound big, but don't overdo it so that you have the opportunity for second time it comes around to really go balls out with it. So in this scenario, for this part of the track, I decided to drop with most of the drums, which is another thing that a lot of EDM producers do, as well as come in with chords now on the first part. So I'll give you an example. The first you heard it. Layer up on climaxes is probably one of the best ways to make your music sound more exciting. I think one of the problems that most people have when their tracks sound very dull and boring is the fact that it always sounds the same. The energy levels always stay flatline instead of coming up and coming down. Again, tension and release and vice versa. And one of the best places that you can do this is in your drums. I used to be very adamant on not layering drums too much. I always felt like, okay, you have your close hat, your open hat, your clap, and it stays the same throughout. But honestly, watching a video by Ian Kirkpatrick where he talks about layering drums for climaxes or choruses when he's producing really changed my mind on it. And honestly, I feel like it's made me a better producer because of it. And it also has transferred to other parts of layering up, maybe like a top sound with the piano for the climax versus without the climax in the verses. It's not going to have that, etc. So for instance, here we have the standard verse drum loop, which is going to sound like this. Okay, and then when we hit the climax, it sounds like this. Now, of course, there's more drums, which is common sense that you want to have, obviously, as your climax approaches. But things that, again, happen that maybe you heard it, but it's not so apparent, but it makes the biggest of differences is the layering of the claps. For instance, the claps before that is just going to sound like this. It's the standard woodblock hit. But the moment we hit the climax, makes it feel bigger. Again, some producers decide to do this. Like I was listening to a Moderat track called Last Time where they have a woodblock hit like this in the verses, but once it hits the chorus, a big ass snare comes in and takes its place. So there's multiple ways to execute this. You don't have to layer up. Maybe you can switch the woodblock for a more exciting sort of clap or woodblocky hit. From there, the open hats as well. A lot of cool things to do is the open hat can start off very short, for instance, or stay short, and you just layer it up with something a little longer. So here, verse, and then we add that, and makes the biggest of differences there. Let's get rid of the right for now. So you can see how it just gives us like a and that's what we want. So it makes the climax part sound a lot bigger. And of course, just adding more drums is another cool way. Just don't overdo it. So if we go to the verse, it's going to sound like. And then climax. And then, of course, when we go back to the verse, which is going to be in this part, we dial it back because we're in the verse and building up to the chorus. Until we finally reach, again, the climax again. So I think that's a cool way too. Remember to take away and to add. Don't always just leave the stuff you've added. Take it away as well. But layering up, really cool. And you can do it anywhere. But the best place I find use for that is going to be more with, again, the drums. All right, guys, and those are going to be most of the tips I wanted to talk about in today's video. If you found any of these useful and they're opening up your mind to trying new things in your music, make sure to hit like and subscribe. It helps a ton. And again, if you're looking for sound banks for electronic dance music like tech house, progressive house, etc., make sure to check out evilsounds.com. That's where you can find all of my sound design work. And in doing so, you're also supporting the videos, as this is what I do for a living. Other than that, you guys take care and you guys have a great rest of your day.